Hey there, it's Jen and Janine from Ready Together, and today we are so excited to be talking to Dr. Vanessa Lapointe, all the way from Canada. Hi, Vanessa.
Hi. Hi.
Hello, hello. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us.
Just a quick bio. Vanessa is an incredible clinical psychologist, a fantastic speaker. I've seen you speak twice personally. I'm a huge fan, and the author of 2 books which live on my bedside table. Such a big fan of Discipline Without Damage and Parenting Right from the Start. So we're just pumped to be having you in here today to talk to our parents in Ready Together who are mostly at the beginning of their parenting journey.
I love
And
that.
the biggest thing that probably gets in the way for people right at the very start is the idea that if they hold their babies too much or respond too much to babies want to be on their chests and they want to be held. And most parents that we work with, they actually don't mind and they kind of enjoy it. But there is this worry that gets in the way, that there's maybe a view that if they don't teach their baby to self-settle, they're making a rod for their own back. What do you think?
Yeah. And so this comes from, years of kind of antiquated advice. And when we trace it back in time, what we actually see is that it has its roots in an approach to child raising that I will refer to as behaviorism, where we really thought that if the behavior, the thing that the child was doing, suited us and looked good, then yay for us, we were doing such a brilliant job. Right? And what we didn't realize at the time was that underneath the surface, there's this whole other incredibly important, foundational, emotional experience happening for the child. And of course, the universal need of all children everywhere is connection. From the very first moments of life, they look around to find us because they know that we are their best bet. And they need that deep connection in order to be okay on their journey. And then we're like, oh, but the sleeping thing, it's a problem.
Yeah.
And so what we discovered is that when we left our babies to cry, they stopped crying and went to sleep. Isn't it great? The emotional story underneath that is they learned not to bother to cry because their cries weren't going to be answered anyways. And what we know is that the sleep falls upon them because the stress of being left alone is just too much for them to bear. And so they go to sleep as an escape route, as a mechanism to preserve themselves in the face of such extraordinary disconnection.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible.
So what advice would you give to brand new mums and dads right now? What can they do to...
We have it in us to be amazing parents. We are a social species by design. We are wired to be brilliantly fantastical at this. If we could just allow ourselves to be the essence of who we are as human beings when we come into this thing called parenting. The challenge is that the very loud voices of the world all around us get in the way of that and have us second guessing ourselves and questioning whether we really know. And then we start, reading all of the books and listening to all the people and talking to Dr. Google. And then we're down the rabbit hole of not really manifesting the idea we are their best bet. We were born for this, And so if I could offer that one piece to mums and dads, new mums and dads, you've got this. You really, really have got this. Just make the world around you be quiet and hear yourself.
That's
so good.
And hear your baby. Yes, I agree. So what are your views on, once baby's obviously a little bit older, the sleep training thing, or, helping them to settle eventually on their own?
Yeah. So sleep training is for adults, not for babies.
Right.
And what I mean by that is that if we are, because there can be things that happen around sleep, lots of different things that happen. You can have babies for a whole variety of issues that really have to kind of figure out what this feeling called falling asleep is. And, it can be a little bit of tricky travels. And when we talk about sleep training, really, really understand we're talking about you, the grown-up, modifying the environment around the child in order to optimally suit that child's nature and that child's needs. And so sleep training really is about how can we train us adults to show up in the way that babies need for us to show up.
Right. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it really is. And then, so obviously our wee babies turn into toddlers, and then, you know, we have skin to skin when we're little, and as they're getting older, what would you say our toddlers need from us to regulate them, to show that connection, to, you know, what can we do with them, especially when their, you know, their personality's coming out and they've got their little wants and needs. And so how would you best tell our mums, help our mums to connect with their toddlers as they're growing a little bit older?
Yeah. And the interesting thing with toddlers is they begin literally to take their first steps away from us.
Yes.
Because they learn how to walk. But they're also mentally coming into, for the very first time in their lives, the understanding that they are a separate being from us. They hadn't quite figured that out before. And now they realize they are, and they can't get enough of this newfound freedom, right? And so with that comes a lot of big emotion and a lot of big overwhelm. And what we know about the toddler brain is that it's not yet wired up for them to be able to manage all of those feelings on their own. And so helping them to figure out how to regulate their emotions actually requires us as the grown-ups who do have fully formed brains to co-regulate our children from the outside. So we actually are the mechanism, our brain is the mechanism by which the toddler's brain gets to be settled and sorted. And so we really have to watch ourselves and how our emotions are going, so that we can cross over the brain bridge with the relationship that we have with our toddler, get access to their brain, and have it sort of mirroring what is happening on the inside of our brain. And toddlers speak very well. All young children speak very well the language of energy. They speak it long before they speak the language of words. And so they know when you're showing up full of love, full of invitation, full of empathy, full of compassion, and they will be able to be settled and sorted and regulated by you with all of that in mind.
And it's got to be genuine, doesn't it?
It has to be genuine. And sometimes parents then say to me, but I really don't feel like I know what I'm doing. I don't think I have this sorted out. Like, how can I make it genuine when I'm really like at a loss myself? And what I would offer, if that's your experience as a parent, you're listening to this and you're like, oh snap, I don't have it. What I would offer you is that you get to, rather than fake it until you make it, take this to heart, faith it until you make it. Because it's coming. I promise you it's coming. So just keep the faith. I'm like air pumping my fist. Keep the faith. It will come. You just stay the course and watch some miracles happen.
Yes, so good. And what about, I loved when I heard you speak in Australia a couple of years ago, and you were talking about boundaries, and I think it was a story about your son, actually. And I just loved, you're one of the few people, because it's all well and good to teach parents about just connect, but you give this really practical advice around how to set that boundary and how to wait for the right moment. Could you talk more about just when we do need to say that needs to stop? And you do that so well.
In my meaning business mama voice, right?
Yeah.
You know,
swagger.
That's right. Boom. It's an interesting thing because we have this, I think that we've really started to get the message out that connection is everything and relationship is everything. And so you see sort of attachment parenting and gentle parenting and connection parenting and all of these sort of movements happening, which is wonderful. Unfortunately, there is a seedy underbelly to all of that, because we get the message we're supposed to connect to our children and we're supposed to have compassion for them and we're supposed to have empathy and everybody's supposed to be happy. And then we start to feel like we are not allowed to say no. We are not allowed to have boundaries and rules and norms and expectations. And so this seedy underbelly of the giant sort of connected parenting movement, of which I'm a huge proponent.
Yeah.
The seedy underbelly of that is kind of what I refer to as like the Flowery Meadows parenting approach. Like where you just like release them to the flowery meadows to watch them blossom. It never ends well.
No.
That is not what children need.
No.
We call it now permissive parenting,
Yes.
right? And so you must be able to say no, and you must be able to say no with conviction and with swagger, and like it's like no big deal. Just what's happening. My answer is no. Or if something really challenging is going on for your child, that you can give them a very firm, that must stop. I know it's hard, sweetheart.
Yes.
It's so hard to be a big brother, isn't it? If I were you, I'd be really, you may not hit.
Yeah.
Gentle hands, my love.
Yeah.
Being a big brother's tricky.
Yeah.
So it's like the sentence starter is, I know. Pardon me, I'll start over. The sentence starter is, no.
Yeah.
No. ... I know. So that they're firm and kind.
Yeah. So there's the empathy that backs it up and all that connection that backs it up, and you're really getting in the space with them, but you're setting that boundary and they need it. It's the guardrails, right?
That's absolutely it. It provides safekeeping, it provides containment, it brings about emotional rest. We all actually do very well in the context of, just some consistency and some norms and some ways of being.
Yeah, so good. Okay, well, I have one last question for you today. And this is around a lot of people that maybe they're on board. They've read the books and they're being consistent, they're setting their boundaries and they're being connected. But there might be family or friends or society around saying, you need to sleep train that baby or they're never going to learn, or what that child needs is a good smack bottom or time out. What can people do just in terms of holding that space for their kids, and in terms of when society or sometimes family is stepping in saying you're getting it wrong?
I think the very first part of that is to recognize inside yourself, what does that bring up for you? Yeah. When your mother-in-law, it's always the mother-in-law, like, let's just be real. Or, the stranger in the grocery store lineup, or the well-intentioned, neighbor down the street, or whoever. When they say those kinds of things to you, what happens inside of you? Do you feel, fearful that you're going to do it wrong? Do you feel worried that you're not good enough? Do you feel that you might be failing your child? Like, what's coming up inside of you? Pay attention to that, because this is a subconscious program and it runs the show of your life. And one of the biggest calls to action that we will experience as parents is the invitation to rewrite those programs. Every single triggering, challenging, mucky, difficult moment that you have as a parent is just a program getting stirred up into existence. So pay attention to that. The next piece that I would offer is that whenever anybody comes to you with any kind of well-intentioned but maybe not terribly helpful advice, say to them, thank you. It's the quickest way to shut down the conversation. I really appreciate how much you care about your grandchildren. What an amazing grandma you are, that you're thinking about all of this and that you would take the time to come and offer me that advice. Thank you. Yeah. Haven't made her wrong.
Yeah.
Haven't made her right. Have made her heard.
Yeah.
And that's really important. And then the very final thing that I would say to moms and dads, just remember who you're here in the service of. Yeah. You're here in the service of that child whose very existence in this lifetime depends on you figuring it out and showing up. You don't got to keep nobody happy. You just show up in the most authentic form of you and you go toes to the line for your kid.
Yeah, you're their advocate. That's so fantastic.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Thank you so much for your time today. We are delighted to be talking to you, and that was just so fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Wonderful to have you here.
Bye.
See you.
Bye for now.
Bye.